Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and dudes of all teenagers, as my hero Christian would say, thank you so much for stopping by. For those who haven't been informed already, this is the start of what I'm calling MLP Fan Appreciation Month. Since the beginning of the year, I've had fans flooding in for my MLP videos, and what better way to show my appreciation to you guys than give you an entire month? I don't want to make this intro too long, so thank you everybody who subscribed to me, and I do hope you enjoy all of the deck profiles. Starting our deck profile bonanza is going to be a pink and orange. Last set, orange got a pretty bad rap for being the weakest of the 6 colors. But in a strange twist here in Season 2, the Applejack starter is actually the best of the main 6 in my opinion. Its flip effect is fairly easy to pull off, and even if you don't flip it right away, it has a very useful effect that you can use. The ability to give one of our friends +2 power during both the scoring phase and any face-offs after that is just amazing. I felt the best way to pull out this card's potential was to pair it with pink. By using Applejack's ability on Big Top, you can make him a 5 for the turn, making it more likely to pull off his effect and start getting rid of some friends, and then you also get to flip because that would make him 5. Pink's field control also combos really nicely with all of the orange cards that control hands. With all of that in mind, let's take a quick look at the deck list. As always, if you're just here to net deck the deck list, then here it is. Please enjoy. I only humbly ask that you leave me a like on your way out. For the rest of us, let's take a closer look. One problem I seem to have with orange and pink is that both colors are very expensive. We can make up for it with little action point savers like this card. This card doesn't really need to ever be moved away from your home. All you have to do is exhaust it and you can give its power to another one of your orange cards. In other words, you can give its power towards either of the 2 problems on the board without actually moving it, as long as one of your orange friends are there already. Biggest Brother Big Mac is a ridiculously good card. Its color requirement is met as soon as you flip Applejack, which normally happens very, very early. Not only does it pay itself off in power, but if you put it and Applejack on a problem, then by themselves they're a 9. Even later in the game, when you have to start moving them around by paying 2 action points, you're paying 4 to put 9 on a problem. They're just so big. And then you start pumping Big Mac with Barn Raiser, it's too much. Counterlot Knights ended up giving orange one of the best new cards in the game. With Earth Pony Royal Guard, you can look at your opponent's hand and get rid of 1 friend card. If you're running an orange deck, I would never run less than 2 of this card, and I would always try to keep it at 3. You do have to play it to your home, which is kind of awful, but let's look at what you gain. He has 2 power, so if you have to pay the 2 to move him somewhere, you're still keeping your power for points. You can look at your opponent's hand and get rid of 1 friend, and if that friend costed more than 1 action point, then you're way more than making up for your points. You can also look at the other friends they have and try to guess what they're going to do next turn. And best and most importantly, you can check their hand for events and resources that can gain them face-off advantage. If you know that yellow player you're playing against has a Critter Cuisine in their hand, then you know what you have to do to get around it. Overall, this card is awesome, not just for getting rid of one of your opponent's friends in their hand, but also for checking their hand to make sure you can plan around them. Full Steam is 4 for 4, and that's mighty delicious. We only run him at 2 because he doesn't really help with our core strategy, but he's so fun to play. I don't feel that Granny Smith is getting the love that she deserves. You guys did read her effect, right? Every single time you confront her problem, not just win a face-off, but every time you confront her problem, you can pay 1 and make your opponent discard a card. This deck's meant to run on just a few friend cards at a time, so you're not going to really need the action points for very much at the end of the game. Admittedly though, this isn't a very good thing to happen early game, because you're not going to have the action points to pay for the effect, so we're only going to run 2 of them. But I still feel like it's a very powerful tech to have. Getting onto the pink side of things, we obviously run the 3 for 3 power pink because it fixes our colors and gives us a lot more to work with. Getting 1 brown Betty out on the field will meet all of your pink requirements. 3 Big Top, because with all of the muscle that you have in this deck, winning face-offs isn't going to be that big of a deal. This deck is also very, very slow. If you can get a Big Top on the field, then you can start eating away some of the advantages that your opponent built while you were trying to get your forces up. We run a full play set of Responsibility Pie, and some people are going to disagree with this hardcore. They're going to say, oh, well, it costs too much. You can't run a full play set of Responsibility Pie in any deck. 2 of it most, 2 of it most, 2 of it most. I kind of agree, but I think this card has a lot of really great synergy with the rest of the deck. One of my favorite things is you can play this Pinkie Pie to dismiss one of your opponent's friends, and then get rid of this to use Applejack's effect to look at the top 3 cards of your deck for a different friend and put that in your hand, and then you're increasing your hand advantage. You can also get rid of Pinkie with the next card we're going to talk about and give it extra power, so I personally think Pinkie is worthy to have at 3 in this particular deck. Lily is a very interesting game-winning card. You can pull off some very interesting tech plays using Lily, although her main use is she's 2 cost for 2 pink. When she comes into play, though, it'll normally be later in the game, and you're going to have some of the Earth Royal Pony Guards in play, or whatever they're called, or maybe you're going to have like a Pinkie Responsibility Pie, or pretty much something that isn't useful anymore that you can get rid of. And if you can get rid of it, then she becomes 4 power for the turn, and 2 for 4 power ain't bad, folks. And finally, we're taking in 1 DJ Pawn. I already feel that DJ should be one card that everybody should be using in their pink decks, but it actually does have some more application here than just a staple. Let's say, for instance, you use Earth Pony Guard and you look at your opponent's hand and their hand is just riddled with cards you don't want to deal with. You play a DJ Pawn, use Error Pony Shuffling, and then all of a sudden that scary hand ain't so scary. Or let's say it's a little bit later in the game. You've already played out your hand, you've only got like this card and one other card. Pretty much you can go up by 2, and if your opponent has more than 4 cards, they're going minus. You plus, they minus, everybody has a good laugh. I guess my main argument for her is she's too good too often not to run at least one of, and she's especially good here because we can use Royal Guard to look at your opponent's hand to make sure it's something you want to get rid of. Our event lineup isn't really anything super special. We run 3 Vision of the Future because it wins face-offs. Downright Dangerous dismisses Owls, dismisses Cloud Chasers, dismisses a lot of other things that give you problems. Get This Party Started is the best draw engine in the game, and drawing one right after you pull off DJ Pawnee is just hilarious. You have 4 cards? Well, I have 6. Come at me, bro! Good orange events are kind of hard to come by, and this, I believe, is actually one really good orange event. After your opponent moves a character, any character, it can be their main character if their main character's flipped over already, or any other character they might happen to move, or plays from their hand, which is fantastic, then you can exhaust it so it can't actually do whatever your opponent put it in play and intended for it to do. Exhausted friends can't help with face-offs, and they can't help with confronting problems. So if you throw this little wrench in their gears, then they will have to waste 1 turn either trying to fix it, or they'll have to delay it till next turn, which is lulzy. Really wish we had room for a 3rd one of these, but Pink has some of the best events in the game, so we need to just kind of move along and give that space to Pink. Hoof Wrestling is I don't really like the showdown cards. I feel like they're a little bit cheesy, a little bit hard to do right, but in this case, I actually kind of like Hoof Wrestling. Simply because if you happen to win, you get to look at your opponent's hand and get rid of something. The cool thing about this is because it's free, you can do this before playing an Earth Royal Pony Guard to see if there's something you actually need to get rid of, or if you should just save your Pony Guard. If you happen to lose, then you have enough high power cards that it's not going to put you at that much of a disadvantage, and normally your opponent's going to have to put something with high power on top of your deck, and you can go into a face-off and win anyway. So yeah, it's not the best card. I would consider maybe taking this out for another Plum Tuckered Out or something else like that, but I kind of like the tech when you pull it off. I'm not normally a huge fan of accessories, but Chicken Costume is probably one of the most powerful accessories in the metagame. If you can see that one of your opponent's friends has to continuously exhaust itself to use its effect, you play this card, and that card is now useless. No more Cloud Chaser. Cloud Chaser will dismiss itself if you try to pull off its effect. No more Bulk Biceps. No more Twilight Ursa Vanquisher. Just so many good targets for this card that not running it is nearly impossible. It's even more hilarious in this deck because you can play this on somebody, and then when they move, you can play Plum Tuckered Out to force them to exhaust, and then they're dismissed. One of my favorite moments when testing this deck was my opponent played Octavia, and I played this on Octavia, and the next turn they moved Octavia, and I played Plum Tuckered Out to discard Octavia, which was the most lolsy thing that's ever happened. And this can be done with a lot of different characters. You can do this with Holly Dash, for example. Big top, full stack, it's just glorious. 3 yellow Parasprite because it's necessary, and actually pretty funny in this deck, because you can thin out targets with Jar Judger and Royal Earth Pony Guard, and then they have to discard good stuff for Parasprite. This deck is very, very late game heavy. This deck really doesn't have any early game whatsoever, so we run Manticore, because Manticore is a great way with dealing with really early blue decks, yellow decks, and some purple decks depending on the deck variety. Like most troublemakers, it doesn't have any sort of application in the late game, but early game, this is kind of a beast. Moving on to problems, we run Apple Bucking Day as our starting problem because, come on, that effect though, I mean seriously. It's a +2 power booster that only works for your main character. Surprise, you're probably gonna win. Threat Against Counterlot is a really nice high power card that is kind of hard for your opponent to solve, but because you have so much muscle in your deck, is very easy for you to solve. And once it's been confronted by either player, troublemakers can't be played there anymore. That admittedly doesn't help out as often as you'd think, but it's still kind of a nice cherry to have. Fruit Bat Roundup is a great card for any deck that is very, very action point extensive. Chances are you're never going to have enough action points for this card to hurt you very much, because you are so reliant on spending action points as soon as you get them. Raise This Barn is another high power card that's hard for your opponent to solve. It has a very nice bonus of 3, and better yet, Orange Friends here cannot be dismissed. Most meta decks don't use orange, so you're really the only one that's going to be benefiting from this. Again, this is another card that benefits orange and really nobody else. In a way, you can think of this card as a card with a bonus of 3, but that 1 bonus point you can get anytime, even if your opponent solves this first. Every deck that runs orange should run 2 of this problem. I think that about rounds up the deck. A few quick tips before you get to rocking it. Pink decks obliterate this kind of deck. While your opponent can't really get you with downright dangerous, things like Pinky Responsibility Pie hurt this deck more than a lot of others, because if they get rid of something like a Big Mac, it actually really hurts. The early game in this deck is not good, borderline non-existent. Don't let that discourage you. If you happen to let your opponent get a little bit of a lead in the early game, don't worry about it. Even if they're rocking 7-0 against you, you can just use that time to build up your action points and late game sweep them. It is very hard to outmuscle an orange deck if you let them build up steam. Don't underestimate Lily's ability, and always play her after you play a Royal Guard or a Responsibility Pie so that you have something to give up for her. 2 for a 1-turn 4 power is really good, it just is. You can also use her in slightly more creative ways, like if you can't pay the action points to move one of your friends out and also have her, you can get rid of that friend, get that for the turn, and then possibly sweep for game. Not something you'll use super often, but something to keep in mind. Finally, save Chicken Costume for something that actually matters if you happen to get Plum Tuckered Out in your hand. Obviously, if your opponent drops something like Bulk Biceps, drop it immediately. But don't just play Chicken Costume and then let it sit there not doing anything for turns. If you don't have Plum Tuckered Out or a reason to play it, don't show it to your opponent. Just don't do it. There's no reason for it. I hope you enjoyed the first deck of MLP month. If you did enjoy, it would be super helpful if you happen to hit that like button. Those likes really do help me out. Have your own thoughts on the deck? What would you do differently? Just leave it in the comments section below. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news. See you in just a couple of days.